On your marks. Set.
Yeah, so welcome, Jack Green, onto the Vinco Videocast Series. Thanks for coming on today and to talk to us about your life and successful career in athletics as a 400-meter hurdler. It'd be great to get an insight into the ups and downs on that journey. You've been quite vocal about that. So yeah, I guess let's just start. You were born in Maidstone in Kent. And yeah, how did you come across athletics? Was there a big scene down there that you could get into for youngsters?
Yeah, so I was born in Maidstone, but I moved down to Folkestone when I was 3 and grew up down there. And I didn't really have an interest in sport to begin with. I liked animals and dinosaurs, and that's what I wanted to do. But I tried out for the primary school's district sports team, sprinted down the grass track and realised that I was good at something, and I quite liked being told I was good at something and winning, and started just running from there on. So I joined Ashford Athletics Club as a Julie Rose junior, so the same as many kids down in Kent and East Kent, and kind of went from there and started to fall in love with sport and football, rugby, athletics, and yeah, I was just very fortunate to be talented at something, and then specifically later in my career at 400-meter hurdles. But I had a very standard start, same as a lot of people of just trying out their athletics club and being good, but I wasn't the best. And it wasn't until I was 15, 16 that I found 400-meter hurdles, and I found the event that suited my talents best. And yeah, the rest is not quite history because we'll talk about it, but kind of history.
Yeah. And was hurdles the kind of first thing that you jumped into straight away, or were you kind of mixing up the events and just testing and seeing what you enjoyed most?
Yeah, I wanted to be a 100-meter runner like everyone, but I didn't quite have the out-and-out speed. I was fast, but not quite fast enough. So being 6'4", and obviously so I was tall as a kid, I started as a high jumper, did 800 metres and cross-country. And it wasn't until I did a 4x4 for Ashford at just like a Kent league that I did a relay, and my split was one that would put me top 5 in the country for my age. I thought, brilliant, this is the one I'll do then. And then being 6'4", it was a year later, I was very fortunate to meet a coach called June Plews down in Canterbury, who is just exceptional. And she was a hurdles coach, and she pulled me to one side and said, you should probably give hurdles a go, being as tall as you are and running the 400 metres. And yeah, then I became a 400-meter hurdler, and that's the one I stuck with.
And you actually went on to be relatively, well, say we were very successful at quite a young age. You went pro at the age of 18, and you went on to represent your country at quite a few big events at such a I think you were under 23 Euro champ and more. So yeah, what was that like? Kind of finding that success so early on. Was it quite a lot of pressure to deal with initially?
Yeah, I definitely was too successful too quickly, I think, in terms of I had no emotional intelligence, had very much a lack of experience, a lot of arrogance that then comes with that, being 19 and going to your first World Championships, winning the European Under-23s. I was top 10 in the world by the age of 20, and very much saw myself as the next big thing. And I just didn't have the toolbox as such to deal with the real difficulties of sport, the ups and the downs, and also the intensity that sport requires from you, because you're just on. It's all or nothing in track and field, as many people will know. And yeah, that's a hard life to live when you're doing it every single day. And I was unable to take away the identity of an athlete outside of athletics. So I was just at this high intensity mindset and behaviours and actions just all the time. And it wasn't something I was able to sustain, which obviously a big part of my story is what we'll talk around mental health and the work I do now. But yeah, it was a tough experience. I'm very fortunate to have been successful at a young age, but I wish I'd learned a little more before that success came.
Is there any way which you think, I don't know if there's been anything implemented since, that can help people, because inevitably there are going to be those that make it at that sort of young age? Is there anything that is there that's been put in place to help with that process? Because obviously it's great that you're making it at a young age. So is that something that you don't want to take away, that you don't want to stop people making it at a young age? So has there been anything put in place to help people through that process?
I'm not sure about officially, but I think it comes down to responsibility of your support network, so your friends, your family, and your coach as well. And that's the thing, coaching is a really hard job because you wear so many hats. It's not just here's a program, see you later. You're a friend, you're almost a parent as a coach, you're doing every single piece of someone's lifestyle as an athlete. And I think there's a big responsibility in being able to help your athletes learn and manage them and manage their emotional health as well as all of the rest. We're very good at managing physical health. It's something that we're quite clued up on and we understand, we can read about, but individuals' emotions and mental health is a completely different story. And I think that's something that within athletics, within sport, it's becoming bigger and bigger and becoming more important. Not that it ever wasn't important, but I think the awareness is much higher, and especially with the last couple of years of COVID as well, have just kind of accelerated that need for support and services to support people with that side of performance as well. So I work in workplace wellbeing now, and I'm very passionate from my athletic experience to understand that a human being is actually what you are, not just an athlete, and you need to thrive personally to thrive professionally. And I think that's something we all need to learn in sport, that the human being needs to be looked after first before we worry about the athlete.
Mm-hmm. And then from this success, you made it to the home games in London in 2012, a massive stage, and I'm sure one that you look back on, with still great memories, even though you came fourth in the relays. So yeah, just talk through what that moment was like. I mean, what was it like making the team? Knowing that you were going to be able to compete in front of thousands of people, and some of which you would have known.
Yeah, it's a strange one because I was so driven, so intense, so obsessive, and had a lot of self-belief that it wasn't just about making the Olympics. In my head, I was always going to make it, even from the age of whenever it was announced, when I might have been 14 or so, or 15, and just going, I will be at those Olympics. So just getting there was almost something I expected of myself, which is completely bizarre when you think I was 20 years old and I was going into an Olympic Games top 10 in the world, and what an amazing thing. Yet I'd never appreciated that because I just saw it as part of the journey of, well, I'm not Olympic champion yet, so that doesn't matter. That's all that's important. So in terms of my memories of the Olympics, I have very little of them. I think because I was so driven, so blinkered, I really can't remember much, and the only thing I can remember is the feeling of being completely overwhelmed and almost scared, this fear of failure, essentially, because I'd demanded so much from myself, and now was time to pay up. And you're trying to pay up in front of 80,000 people when you're 20 years old. And I said lack of emotional intelligence and experience, and I just didn't know how to handle that and handle the pressure that I put upon myself. And that's something I think we all need to learn around that internal pressure and being able to manage that and deal with that. When in reality, just getting to the Olympics was a huge achievement, especially at 20 years old. I should have had possibly another 3 Olympics in me at that point, when you think another 12 years or so could have been possible. But I wasn't that kind of mindset at the time. So the only thing I can remember is fear, unfortunately, though I am incredibly proud of that achievement now, though I wasn't at the time because I fell in the hurdles, which obviously was a disaster for me at that point. And then we came fourth in the relay, which felt like a disaster because I just was desperate to have a medal to make up for the fact that the hurdles didn't go right. So it felt like lightning had kind of struck twice, and I didn't quite know how to handle that as a young man at the time.
To those outside your bubble, even with the incident that went on, you'd still, I think people would look at that as, quite as a very successful thing. You've made it to the Olympics. That's a big thing. But obviously, beyond that, it wasn't quite that way. There were other things going on which you have been vocal about. And yeah, it'd be great to just, hear a lowdown about that kind of side, the mental health side of things and where things took a turn.
Yeah, so within 12 months of being top 10 in the world, I was talked about as one of the most talented athletes of a generation. I came fourth at London, missed a medal by 0.13. I was second in that relay. So very successful at that point. Should have been going on and doing some amazing things in terms of results. But I was diagnosed with depression, bipolar tendencies and anxiety after the Olympic Games. So I was considered a threat to my own life. And It took me a long time to get to that point of them being diagnosed and seeking help and various things, because I didn't believe in mental health, because I was male, a sports person. I was deemed to be successful. It sounds like all the things that sound pretty good to me and still sound pretty good to me, and I think to everyone else. And how could someone like that be struggling? And so I struggled for a long time because I couldn't even fathom what mental health was. I thought it was an excuse for people that were weak and not people like me. And yeah, it kind of kick-started my journey, and with a greater awareness of mental health, I then grew to understand that I really struggled with anxiety and mental health when I was young as well, as a young athlete. So before my name was known, and just within society, like my day-to-day in society, struggling with anxiety and things. But because I was always successful on a track, it kind of papered over those struggles, because we don't put well-being or mental health or poor mental health together with high performance. So we always think, well, if you're performing well, then you must be fine. But actually, there's a cost to performing well. And that's something that I think we need to understand better, that you can perform incredibly well and still be really struggling and very unwell. It's just the cost of success can sometimes require that kind of payment of poor mental health, which it shouldn't be the case, because there are ways to be successful without destroying yourself.
And taking that time to step away from the sport, did that help you kind of reflect on yourself as a person and what you wanted to get out of the sport in a better sense than rather than just taking on this high pressure environment? Were you looking at what other factors you could take away from the sport in general?
To be honest, I took 2 years out, roughly 18 months, 2 years out, and to be honest, all I did was hide. I took myself away from a high pressure environment, so I felt better. But at no point did I manage or learn around my mental health. I just escaped and ran away. So then I felt better, so I returned to the sport, but I hadn't actually learned anything. And I just went on the same old spiral that I'd just been in. So after 2 years, I moved to Florida, worked with a coach called Lauren Seagrave, that many people will know, who is arguably one of the best coaches that ever lived. I've been very fortunate to work with some of the best coaches ever in Malcolm Arnold and Lauren Seagrave. Went out there, fantastic experience, but my mental health was still poor. And despite all that, I ended up going to a second Olympics, became a European and world medalist, and back ranked in the top 10, all of that jazz. But I was still really, really struggling. And yeah, that never really changed. So as much as the success returned, my mental health hadn't improved. And that was probably the most important thing. And I hadn't sorted that at all.
Mm-hmm. And so since 2019, post Rio and everything, and since your retirement, what have you decided to go on to do to, obviously there's this transition for a lot of people out there that have to go from this athletic life, whether they've made it or not, some people eventually have to sort of move on from the sport and do life as such. So yeah, what did you go on to do from there, and how did you approach doing life?
So during the last few years of my career, the last 3-4 years of my career, I wasn't funded and I wasn't supported. So I ended up having to work, and I was a public speaker at this point. That's how I was paying the bills and allowing myself to run, was being a keynote speaker, sharing my story about mental health and sharing that with big businesses, and as well as coaching. Did some coaching on the side, worked in gyms. And at the time, it felt really unfair that I had to do those things when I was one of the better athletes around. But actually, it was the best thing that could have happened for me in terms of transitioning out of sport, because when I decided to retire early at 28, I just got rid of the running and I carried on doing everything else I was doing. I didn't have to suddenly find something. So it was very fortunate, because a lot of people really struggle with that identity piece and knowing what to do next. Whereas my identity had already developed from being just an athlete to, I'm also a keynote speaker, I'm a coach, I'm this, and this. So I was very fortunate to have that. And then about 3-4 months after retiring, because of my work in mental health and my views around high performance, I was given the opportunity to work for BBC, became global wellbeing lead for BBC. Kind of fell into that job and was very, very fortunate to be given that opportunity. I was responsible for up to 10,000 people and 30 offices globally. I had to audit the wellbeing strategy at that time, write a new strategy, and support the people, all in workplace wellbeing, something I hadn't obviously worked in, but I had views around. And it was a week before the original lockdown started in the UK. So as you can imagine, it became a very big job very quickly. And one that I
Yeah.
struggled with at times, to be honest, but I'm very proud of the work I did there. So I was in workplace wellbeing, created that network that led to me having consultancy where I worked with a load of global organisations. At the same time, I was coaching. So I had an Italian athlete, Gloria Hooper, who won the World Relays and went to her third Olympics. I was coaching her, coached her to a national record, something that I'm very proud of, and I love coaching and love sport. So that was a good fit. And now I work at a place called Champion Health, which is a workplace platform around wellbeing. So we call ourselves the Netflix of wellbeing, and I support with the performance, the strategy, the sales, and essentially, I have been very lucky to be in a position where I've had one career that was my dream as a kid, and then I've got a second career that has a lot of purpose and a lot of meaning because it's around helping people and helping people not feel the way I did once upon a time, and
Mhm.
still, from very rarely, from time to time, struggle with my own mental health still, but I'm in a position to help other people. So very fortunate to be in a very rewarding profession because a lot of people struggle with that transition and that identity. And I was able to already make that. And I think the key was through necessity, because I wasn't supported during my career, it forced me to find out what else I could do, who else I could be, rather than just
Mhm.
being the athlete and then having to react last minute and create a whole new career. So I'd recommend people start having a little look around. Unfortunately, in sport, we make people feel guilty, make athletes feel guilty if they look at anything other than their sport or their mind isn't 100% focused on their sport. But that's completely ridiculous. You can have hobbies, you can have interests, you can look at other things, you can study, you can do whatever to allow yourself to have this second career that inevitably you will have to have. There is a time limit on sport, unfortunately. I wish we could all stay in sport forever, but your body says otherwise most of the time.
And yeah, I guess out of everything, then, looking back on all the ups and downs that you had, would you change anything really? Because it's kind of made you what you are today, and it's given you this platform, and now you're doing great things, with this platform. So would you really go back and change anything as such?
It's a really good question. It's a really tough one. I've been asked something similar around if I could get rid of the mental health issues and never have experienced that, would I? And the answer is only if I can take the lessons from it, because quite frankly, I'm a much better person. I'm far more well rounded. I'm nicer. I've much more awareness. I'm just better overall. So
Hmm.
obviously, I wouldn't want to ever experience what I did. I wouldn't want anyone to experience the way that I felt, but the lessons that I learned from it have made it almost a positive experience, which is not quite the right description because it was a very traumatic and difficult time, but it's what I've learned from it that I'm very, very proud of and very pleased that I've got and able to share. And yeah, if you could give me the lessons but take away the pain as such, then yes, but that's not how lessons work. You have to go through a bit of pain to learn them. So
Yeah. And just to round everything off, do you have sort of one piece of advice that you would give for any youngsters that are just kind of starting out in the sport and are going to go on this long journey? What would be the one piece of advice you would give to them? Yeah, in the sport.
one piece is a really hard,
Well,
hard
if you
thing
have
to
more, you
do.
can say more.
No, we're going to go one. I'll try my very best to be brief and to the point, which I'm not very good at. One bit would be how you measure yourself. So you are not your results. Life is not just about results. It's not about winning or losing. It's about the effort. So measuring yourself on effort every single day, because effort allows you to be a human being. Because effort understands that some days you only have 60% in the tank because you haven't slept well or you financial stress or the pressure or whatever it is. You've only got 60%. All you can do on that given day is give 100% of that 60. Where we burn out and where we struggle, myself in particular, is you only have 60% in the tank, yet you push yourself far beyond that too often. That's where we can't sustain it, we can't maintain it, and we go. So always measure yourself on effort. It then leads to positive self-talk, because at the end of the day, you're saying to yourself, do you know what? I gave everything that I could. And that's a healthy measure, rather than even when you have given everything you could and you've done the best that you possibly can, and the result isn't quite there, that then becomes negative. You're then saying to yourself, this is not good enough, I'm not good enough. That will get you success in the short term, but that won't lead to happiness and success and consistent success down the line. And quite frankly, the best success and the best you can be comes from consistency, not from flash in the pan moments that we all hear about in the media and so on, because we don't see the journey. But it's about the consistency and the effort that you put in.
Well, thanks very much, Jack Green, for coming on today and talking to us about your life and successful career. I really appreciate it, and good luck in the future.
Thank you very much.